Hi, I'm Charlie, the chaplain from Harbor Light Hospice, and this is a celebration of being alive online. We're now into the month of June. The beauty of the earth is springing out. It's a wonderful time to be alive. And if you are alive today, and if you're listening to me, you probably are, you can do one of the best things that we human beings can do. You can pray. But there's one thing that you and I should never do when we pray. And Jesus talked about this. We should never, ever give up. For a few years, I was assistant pastor in a very large church in Michigan. And I was always on duty in the office on Monday because the senior pastor who did most of the preaching took Mondays off. So I came to the office Monday morning, and our secretary, Ann, was on the phone. She was talking to somebody, and they appeared to have a problem. So Ann gave the phone to me, and I said hello, and on the phone there was a woman who appeared to be in some distress. She said, "I wondered if you found a watch in your church yesterday." She said, "I was visiting my friend and I came with my friend to visit church, and I know I had it on when I came into the sanctuary, but later on that day it was missing. And I wonder if it had fallen off in church and maybe you found it." So I looked at Ann, the secretary, and she shook her head, and I said, "Well, we haven't found anything in the sanctuary." And she said, "Oh, it was so important to me. It belonged to my grandmother and I would really like to find it." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you hold on, and I will go into the sanctuary and see if I can find it." So I laid the phone down on the desk, and I went into the sanctuary, and I walked up the center aisle looking through the pews. One pew on the left, the other pew on the right. I went all the way to the front, and I did not see a watch. So I was about to give up, but then I thought, this watch was so important to this lady on the phone. She sounded like she really, really wanted it. I just have to find it for her. So I got down on my hands and knees, and I started crawling back over the center aisle to the back of the sanctuary, looking under the pews to see if I could find something. And when I got almost all the way to the back, I saw something shiny on the floor. I got up and I went over to it, and sure enough, it was a watch. It looked like a beautiful old antique watch. And I was so excited to go back to the office and tell that lady on the phone that I had found her watch. So I hurried back. I got there, picked up the phone, and I said, "Guess what? I found it. It was laying right under the pew." "Hello?" And then I heard boop, dial tone. I thought maybe we had gotten cut off. So I gave the watch to Ann, the secretary, and I said, "Just hold on to it because I'm sure she will call back." Then I went on with the rest of my day. At the end of the day, when I stopped by the office to say goodbye, I noticed the watch still sitting on the desk. And I said to Ann, "Didn't that lady call back about her watch?" And Ann said, "No, she didn't call back." And I said, "Well, just keep it here. I'm sure she will." But I kept seeing that watch there on the desk every time I went in, for a week, for 2 weeks. The lady never called back. In fact, the last time I saw that watch, it was almost a year later. It was in a box of things from the Lost and Found that were going to be sold at the Women's Society rummage sale. I felt so bad. I wanted her to have that watch so much, but she didn't hold the phone. She hung up. She never called back. If she would have only known how much I wanted her to have it, she would have hung on, but she never did. And she never got her watch back. Jesus said that the one thing we should never do in prayer is give up. Don't give up when you're praying. Don't stop asking. Don't stop seeking. And don't stop knocking on God's door. Because everyone who asks receives, and everyone who seeks finds. And if you keep knocking, the door will be opened. Don't hang up the phone when you're on the edge of a miracle. Don't stop praying a day before God is ready to give you what you need. I have to confess that for a good portion of my life, I saw God as something like a giant vending machine. You know how a vending machine works? You put in your money and you pull the lever and your candy bar comes straight down into the chute for you to enjoy. And when people put their money in and pull the lever and that candy bar gets stuck about halfway down, boy, do they get mad. Have you ever seen anyone? They grab the machine, they shake it, they kick it, they pound it, they curse it. And don't we get angry when God doesn't immediately give us what we need? We pray like putting our coin in the slot. We pull the lever and we expect God's blessings to fall right out of the sky into our hands. But it doesn't work that way. And I think I know why. I think I've learned over the years why God doesn't always answer us immediately. It's because half of the things that I have ever prayed for in my life, later I was glad God did not give those things to me. Did you hear that? Over half of the things that I've prayed for, I became glad later God never gave me those things. Because He had a different plan for me. And like Jesus said, God knows how to give His good gifts to His children. He knows what we need. He knows what's best for us. And He has a desire for us to enjoy all of His goodness. So sometimes when we pray, God says no, because He doesn't want us to have that. But sometimes He says no, because I have something better for you. And if you wait for it, you will have it. You know, this is the truth. I did not get the first church that I applied for. When I was in seminary and was ready to pastor a church, there was an opening in a beautiful church in a beautiful little town in Wisconsin, just north of the Illinois border. And I wanted that church so bad. It was a larger church than most students serve. It had a good, strong budget, a beautiful new building, and it was in a beautiful little town with a wonderful parsonage, and that's where I wanted to be. I interviewed with the district superintendent for that church, and a couple days later he called and told me that they were going to assign a friend of mine to that church, my friend Paul, who had also interviewed, because he was from Wisconsin. I was really upset with God. And I said, God, you gave me a stone here. But God kept saying, no, it's bread. Trust me, it's bread. So a couple weeks later, there was a district superintendent who announced that he was interviewing for a church in rural Illinois, in a place that I never heard of. The name of the town was Wedren. The original name was Weed Run. It was called Weed Run because the people of the railroad had to come to that section of tracks and cut down the weeds all the time that kept growing in between the railroad track ties. So they called that place the Weed Run, but fortunately it was eventually shortened to Wedren. It was a very small church. Their average attendance was between 20 and 25 people. They didn't have any industry. They had a VFW and a bar, but really not much else. So I went there very skeptical, but when I interviewed for that church, the district superintendent called me by the end of the day and said he wanted to appoint me to Wedren Church. Well, I went out there and I saw a very small little white frame church, a very small parsonage. And I preached my first sermon there on Father's Day of 1980. And during the week, I got a call from the chair of Staff Parish Relations. And she told me that people were saying that that sermon that I preached was the best sermon they had heard in 20 years. Well, I don't even remember what I preached about, but I was so glad to hear that. It turned out to be the most wonderful experience of my professional life. Those people were amazing. They were so filled with the love of God. They worshiped with enthusiasm. They served with dedication. They accepted me and put up with all of my bad sermons as well as my good ones. And they were committed to their church. They wanted their church to grow. And they worked hard to help their church grow, even though they didn't have a full-time pastor. And I was so tickled that in 1984, when the Northern Illinois Conference did a survey of local church attendance, they found that the Wedren Church was the 5th fastest growing church in the conference because in the past 5 years, our attendance had come up from 22 to 55. I was never more happy to have 55 people in church, let me tell you. But that church was such a good experience. And I remember during that time, when I was at school, I would see Paul in the hallway. I'd say, "Hey, Paul, how are things going in Wisconsin?" And he'd say, "Oh, it's such a headache." He said, "Oh, the roof is leaking and we're broke and people are upset and they're blaming me." And then I started to realize, I thought God gave me a stone, but he actually gave me bread when he didn't answer my prayer to go to Wisconsin. I wasn't supposed to go to Wisconsin. I was supposed to go to Wedren, and I spent 6 happy years there. It's such an amazing thing when we pray. Sometimes when we pray, we will get an answer right away. Sometimes the answer will be yes, sometimes it'll be no, sometimes it'll be wait. But if you don't get a specific answer, yes, no, or wait, keep praying. Keep praying. Prayer is not a magic formula to get what we want from God. It's a conversation with our Father who loves us. And just like the conversations you've had with your children when they asked you for things, God may want to know, why do you want that? Why do you want that new car? Is it because your neighbor just got one? Well, then you really don't want a car. You want a symbol that will resolve your jealousy with your neighbor. See how it works? That's why God doesn't always answer us right away. And that's why Jesus said, keep asking. It'll be given to you. Keep seeking. You'll find it. And keep knocking. That door will open. This is Charlie, the chaplain of Harbor Light Hospice. Thank you so much for sharing these moments with me. God bless you. Stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.